"Who hurts you?" Mafia boss growled. Single mom flinched when he found the bruise on her thigh. The Velvet Room was less of a bar and more of a sanctuary for the city's darkest sins, wrapped in silk and drowned in 50-year-old scotch. It was a place where the lighting was always low. The music was always a slow, thrumming jazz bass line, and the men who sat in the leather booths owned the pavement outside. Isla Romano tried to make herself invisible. It was a skill she had honed over 3 years of running, a survival mechanism that had become as natural to her as breathing. Keep the head down. Move quickly. Do not make eye contact. If you are nothing, they cannot hurt you. She balanced a tray of crystal tumblers on her left hand, weaving through the crowded floor with the grace of a ghost. Her feet ached in the cheap black heels she had bought at a thrift store, but she kept her face impassive. Rent was due in 4 days. The electric bill was past due. She needed the tips. She needed this job because it paid in cash, and the manager, a man named Mr. Henderson, did not ask too many questions about why she moved apartments every 6 months. In the furthest corner of the club, sitting in a booth that cost more to reserve than Isla made in a year, sat Luca Marino. The city knew the name. The police knew the name, though they rarely spoke it above a whisper. Luca was the kind of man who did not need to shout to be heard. He sat with a stillness that was unnerving, wearing a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders like armor. He was not drinking. He rarely drank when he was working. And for Luca, being awake was working. His dark eyes scanned the room, dissecting threats, calculating profits, and categorizing weaknesses. Then his gaze stopped. It landed on the waitress near the bar. She was slight, with dark hair pulled back into a severe bun that did nothing to hide the delicate curve of her neck. She looked exhausted. That was not unusual here. Everyone who worked the night shift looked tired, but she also looked terrified. Not the nervous anxiety of a new hire. This was something deeper. It was in the way she held her shoulders tight against her ears, the way she checked the exits every time she passed them. A patron, a heavy-set man with a face flushed from too much bourbon, reached out as Isla passed, his hand clamped onto her wrist. "Sweetheart, where is my drink?" the man slurred, his voice booming over the low music. Isla froze. It was a visceral reaction, like a deer hearing the snap of a twig. She did not pull away angrily. She did not laugh it off. She went rigid, her eyes widening with a panic that seemed disproportionate to the situation. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I will get it right away. Please." The man tugged her closer, spilling the contents of her tray onto the expensive carpet. The crash of breaking glass cut through the room. "Look what you did!" the drunk roared. Standing up, Isla flinched. She dropped to her knees instantly, ignoring the shards of glass, and began picking them up with bare hands. "I'm so sorry. It was my fault. Please, I will pay for it. Just do not be angry." Luca watched, his brow furrowing. She was begging. She was not worried about her job. She was worried about the man's anger. She was acting as if the drunken fool was going to strike her right there in the middle of a crowded lounge. The floor manager rushed over, pulling the drunk man away and apologizing, but Luca kept his eyes on the girl. She was shaking. A subtle tremor ran through her hands as she gathered the glass, cutting her finger in the process. She did not even seem to notice the blood. "Enzo," Luca said quietly. The man standing in the shadows behind Luca leaned down. "Boss? The waitress, the one cleaning the glass. Who is she?" Enzo glanced over, uninterested. "New girl. Started 2 weeks ago." "My name is Isla. I think keeps to herself." Luca watched her stand up, cradling the broken glass against her chest like penance. She looked small, too fragile for a world like this. "Find out," Luca said. Later that night, after the club had cleared out and the smoke hung heavy in the air, Luca sat in the back office, the manager. Mr. Henderson stood nervously in front of the mahogany desk. "Is there a problem with the service? Mr. Marino?" Henderson asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "If it is about the spilled drink earlier, I have already reprimanded the girl. You will do no such thing," Luca said. His voice was a low rumble, smooth but dangerous. "Tell me about her." Henderson blinked, confused. Isla, she's a good worker. Quiet, never late. She picks up every extra shift she can. Is she in trouble? Trouble. Henderson shook his head. No, she's a ghost. Clock in, clock out. I know she is a single mother. I have a little boy. She mentioned him once when she needed to swap a shift for a doctor's appointment. Lives over on 4th Street, in those brick tenements. Modest. She does not mix with the other staff. A single mother. Living in the tenements on 4th. Luca tapped his finger against the arm of his chair. That explained the exhaustion. It did not explain the terror. The apartment was cold. Isla kept the heating low to save money. She double-locked the deadbolt, then slid the chain into place. Only then did she exhale. The small one-bedroom unit was clean but sparse. A worn rug covered the linoleum floor, and a second-hand television sat on a crate. It was not much, but it was theirs. She crept into the bedroom. In the center of the double bed lay a small lump under a superhero blanket. Leo. He was 5 years old, with messy, dark hair and an innocence Isla would die to protect. She sat on the edge of the bed, brushing the hair back from his forehead. He stirred, mumbling something about a red truck, and settled back into sleep. I am safe, she whispered to herself, a mantra she repeated 100 times a day. We are safe. She stood up and walked to the small bathroom, closing the door quietly. She stripped off the black uniform, smelling the stale smoke and expensive perfume of the club clinging to the fabric. She washed her face with cold water, staring at her reflection. Dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes. She looked older than 26. She reached down to peel off her stockings. As the nylon slid down her leg, she hissed in pain. There, on her upper left thigh, was a bruise. It was ugly. A mottled, distinct shape of fingers, turning from black to a sickly yellow-green at the edges. It was a week old, but it still throbbed with a dull, heavy ache. She traced the edge of the mark with a trembling finger. He had found them at the grocery store parking lot last week, just for a second. He had grabbed her, squeezed tight enough to crush muscle, and whispered promises of what he would do if she did not come back to him. She had screamed, and a security guard had come running, scaring him off, but Brett Conley was not a man who gave up. Isla quickly pulled on a pair of flannel pajama pants, hiding the mark. She could not look at it. Looking at it made it real. Looking at it meant he was close. She went back to the bedroom and curled her body around her son, facing the door. She kept one hand under her pillow, fingers brushing the handle of the small knife she kept there. It was a pathetic defense against a man like Brett, but it was all she had. The next night, the Velvet Room was manic. It was Friday, and the money was flowing. Isla was exhausted. She had not slept. Every shadow in her apartment looked like Brett. Every creak of the floorboards had sounded like his boots. She moved through the tables on autopilot, drop the drinks, take the cash, fake a smile. Move on. She approached table 4, the prime booth near the back. She froze. Luca Marino was there again. Usually. The boss sat in the office or the VIP balcony. He rarely sat on the floor 2 nights in a row. And he never sat in Section 3. Section 3 was the worst section. Too close to the kitchen doors. Too noisy. But there he was. He was alone. Which was even more terrifying. A bottle of sparkling water sat on the table. Nothing else. Isla approached, clutching her tray against her chest like a shield. Good evening, Mr. Marino, she said, keeping her eyes on the table. Can I get you anything else? Luca looked up close. He was devastating. He had a scar that cut through his left eyebrow, disrupting the perfect symmetry of his face. His eyes were the color of espresso, dark and intense, and they were locked on her face. I am fine. Isla, he said. He knew her name. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Why did the mafia boss know her name? Okay, just wave if you need anything, she stammered, backing away. She spent the next hour acutely aware of his presence. It felt like standing next to a tiger that had not decided if it was hungry yet. Every time she walked past his table, she felt his eyes on her. He was not leering, it was not sexual. Exactly, it was analytical. He was studying her. A group of investment bankers at the next table erupted in laughter. One of them slammed his hand on the table, a sharp, cracking sound that echoed like a gunshot. Isla gasped. Her entire body jerked violently. She dropped the napkin she was holding and spun around, her hands coming up to protect her face before she could stop herself. Silence followed. Isla lowered her hands, her face burning with humiliation. The bankers were staring at her. "Sorry," she whispered. I was startled." She turned to flee to the kitchen, but a hand caught her elbow. It was a gentle touch, firm, but careful. She looked down to see Luca standing there. He had moved so fast she had not even seen him rise. "Breathe," Luca commanded softly. Isla looked up at him, her eyes wide and wet. "I am fine. I am a little jumpy. Too much coffee." "That was not coffee," Luca said. His voice was low, intended only for her. "You thought he was going to hit you." "No," she lied quickly. "No, of course not." "Isla." The way he said her name made her knees weak. It was a demand and a caress all at once. "Who is making you look like that?" "Nobody," she said, pulling her arm away. "I have to get back to work." She hurried into the kitchen, her heart racing so fast she felt sick. Back at table 4, Enzo slid into the booth opposite Luca. He looked annoyed. "Boss," Enzo said, keeping his voice low. "Stop looking at the girl." Luca picked up his water glass, his eyes still fixed on the swinging kitchen doors. "I am just watching." "I know that look," Enzo warned. "That is the, I am going to save the stray puppy look." "She's a waitress. She's clearly damaged. Fragile women break, Luca. And when they break, they cut you. We have business to handle. The shipment from the docks comes in at 2 o'clock. "I heard you," Luca said dismissively. "The shipment is handled. Leave her alone," Enzo pressed. "She is terrified of her own shadow. You getting involved brings heat. We do not need heat." Luca ignored him. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a money clip. He peeled off 5 $100 bills and placed them under his empty glass. "She needs the money," Luca said simply. "Look at her shoes. They are worn through at the heel." Enzo sighed, shaking his head. "You are going to regret this." The shift ended at 3 in the morning. Isla changed back into her street clothes in the cramped locker room. Her legs throbbed. The bruise on her thigh felt like it was burning, the fabric of her jeans rubbing against the sensitive skin. She collected her tips. The $500 from table 4 lay heavy in her pocket. It was too much. She should give it back, but she needed it. That was 2 months of groceries. That was new shoes for Leo. She walked out the back exit into the cool night air. The alleyway was dark, illuminated only by a single flickering street lamp. She took a step and stumbled. Her leg gave out. For a second. The pain in her thigh flaring sharp and hot. She caught herself against the brick wall, hissing through her teeth. "You are hurt," the voice came from the shadows. Isla spun around, pressing her back against the brick. Luca stepped into the light. He was wearing a long black overcoat now, looking like a prince of the underworld. He was smoking a cigarette, the ember glowing bright orange. "Mr. Marino," she breathed. "You scared me." "You are limping," he observed. He tossed the cigarette to the ground and crushed it with the toe of his expensive shoe. He walked toward her. "I just twisted my ankle," she lied. "It is nothing." "You did not twist your ankle," Luca said. He stopped 2 feet away from her. He was so tall. He blocked out the rest of the alley, the rest of the world. "You were limping earlier, too, on the left side." "I am fine," she insisted, pushing herself off the wall. "I have to go home. My son. The babysitter is waiting." She tried to sidestep him, but he moved with her, blocking her path. He was not aggressive, just immovable. His eyes dropped to her leg. She was wearing ripped jeans. The style was fashionable, but hers were old. There was a tear high on the thigh, usually covered by the long tunic she wore. But as she moved, the fabric shifted. The street lamp caught the skin through the rip. It illuminated the ugly purple-black mark that bloomed across her flesh. Luca went still. The air around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Isla," he said. His voice had changed. The smooth baritone was gone, replaced by something grinding and rough. He reached out. She flinched, squeezing her eyes shut, expecting a blow, but his fingers barely grazed the denim near the tear. He did not touch the skin. He just looked at it. He looked at the evidence of violence painted on her body. "Who hurt you?" It was not a question. It was a growl. It vibrated in his chest, deep and terrifying. Isla opened her eyes. She saw the look on his face. It was not a pity. It was furious, lethal, controlled fury. Panic clawed at her throat. If he knew. If he found out about Brett. Brett would come. Brett would hurt Leo. Men like Luca Marino did not understand. They thought violence could solve violence. But Brett was a disease. He would destroy everything. "Nobody," she choked out. I just fell. "Do not lie to me." Luca stepped closer. His presence was overwhelming. He smelled of rain and tobacco and danger. "That is a handprint, Isla. A man's handprint." "Who put it there?" "Stop it," she cried, hysteria rising in her voice. "Please, just let me go. I cannot do this. I cannot be here." She shoved past him. He could have stopped her. He could have grabbed her with one hand and held her there. But he didn't. He let her pass. She ran down the alley, her limp forgotten in the face of her fear. She ran toward the bus stop, clutching her bag, praying he would not follow. Luca stood alone in the alley. He watched her retreating figure until she turned the corner and vanished. He looked down at his own hands. They were curled into fists so tight the knuckles were white. Rage, hot and unfamiliar, coursed through his veins. He had seen violence his whole life. He had dealt it out himself. But seeing that mark on her, on someone so soft, so clearly trying to survive, it twisted something inside him. He pulled out his phone. He dialed a number and put it to his ear. "Enzo," he said. "Yeah, boss. The girl, Isla." "I told you to leave it alone. Luca—" "Shut up and listen," Luca said, his voice deadly calm. "I want a name. I want to know who she is running from. I want to know who her ex is, where he is, and who he works for. Luca, she has bruises. Enzo. Someone put their hands on her." There was silence on the other end of the line. Even Enzo, cynical as he was, knew what that tone meant. That tone meant someone was going to bleed. "I will make some calls," Enzo said quietly. "Give me an hour." "You have 30 minutes, Luca said, and hung up. Isla burst into her apartment, locking the door, the deadbolt and the chain with trembling fingers. She slid down to the floor, her back against the wood, gasping for air. The apartment was silent. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. She crawled across the floor to the bedroom. Leo was still asleep, one arm thrown over his head, his mouth slightly open. She climbed into the bed, not bothering to change out of her street clothes. She pulled her son into her arms, burying her face in his soft hair. He smelled like baby shampoo and innocence. Tears leaked from her eyes, soaking the pillow. She had messed up. She had let someone see. She had let a dangerous man see her weakness. Luca Marino was a killer. She knew the stories. Everyone knew the stories. He was not a savior. He was a predator, just like Brett. But she closed her eyes and saw his face in the alley. She remembered the way he had stopped Enzo from dismissing her. She remembered the $500 under the glass. She remembered the way his voice had dropped when he saw the bruise. "Who hurt you?" It did not sound like an accusation. It sounded like a shield being slammed into the earth. She tightened her hold on her son. She should run. She should pack their bags right now, get on a Greyhound bus, and go to another city. Start over again. But she was so tired. She was so incredibly tired of running. For the first time in 3 years, someone had looked at her and seen the pain instead of the object. Someone had been angry at her, not at her. Isla cried quietly in the dark, the warmth of her son against her chest, terrified of the past that was hunting her, and equally terrified of the strange, dark warmth she had seen in the mafia boss's eyes. The shadows in Isla's life had shifted. For years, the darkness had been a place of fear, a hiding spot where she prayed she would not be found. But now, the shadows had eyes. For 3 days, Isla felt the weight of a gaze following her. It was not the predatory, chaotic feeling of Brett hunting her. This was different, you know? It was heavy, steady, and oddly precise. When she took the bus home from the Velvet Room at 3 a.m, a black sedan with tinted windows glided 2 cars behind the bus, turning only when she reached her stop. When she walked the 2 blocks to her crumbling apartment building, she saw men she did not recognize, broad-shouldered figures in dark coats, standing near the bodega across the street. They did not look at her, but they did not leave until she was safely inside with the deadbolt thrown. She should have been terrified. Part of her was... But another part, the part of her that was exhausted down to her marrow, felt a treacherous sense of relief. At the club, the change was even more palpable. Luca Marino was no longer a distant figure in the VIP booth. He was a constant presence. He did not sit in her section every night, but he was always there, watching. The atmosphere in the club shifted around him. The rowdy bankers were quieter. The handsy patrons kept their hands to themselves. On Tuesday night, a regular customer named Mr. Vance, who usually made crude comments about Isla's figure, snapped his fingers at her to demand a refill. Before Isla could even force a smile and step forward, Luca was there. He did not shout. He simply placed a hand on the back of Mr. Vance's chair and leaned down. Isla could not hear what he whispered, but she saw the color drain from Vance's face. The man stood up, threw a $100 bill on the table, and left without finishing his drink. Luca turned to Isla. His expression was unreadable, his face a mask of sharp angles and dark intent. "I will not tolerate anyone disrespecting you," he said. His voice was calm, but it carried the finality of a judge's gavel. "Not in my house?" Isla clutched her tray, her knuckles white. "I could have handled him. Mr. Marino, I'm used to it." "You should not have to be used to it," Luca replied, his eyes searching hers. "And you do not have to handle anything alone anymore." She stared at him, confusion warring with wariness. Men did not do favors for free. Men like Luca, powerful, dangerous men, always collected a debt eventually. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because I can," he said simply, before turning and walking back to the shadows. Isla went back to work, her heart pounding, a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She told herself to be careful. She told herself he was just another wolf, perhaps one with better manners, but a wolf nonetheless. Then the phone rang. It was 2 days later. Isla was on her break, sitting on a crate in the alley behind the club, getting a breath of fresh air. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She pulled it out. Unknown caller. Her breath hitched. It could be anyone. It could be a telemarketer. It could be the electric company calling about the overdue bill. She slid her thumb across the screen and raised it to her ear. "Hello?" Silence greeted her. A heavy, breathing silence. Then, a voice that made her blood turn to ice water. "Found you, babe." Isla stopped breathing. The world tilted on its axis. The sounds of the city, the traffic, the distant sirens, faded into a dull roar. "Brett," she choked out. "You thought you could run?" His voice was rough, slurring slightly. He was drunk. He was always meanest when he was drunk. "You took my boy. You stole my son and you ran away like a thief." "He is not your son," Isla whispered, tears instantly springing to her eyes. "You gave up your rights when you put me in the hospital." "I am coming for you, Isla," Brett snarled. "I am close. I can smell you, and when I find you, I am going to teach you a lesson you will never forget." The line went dead. Isla dropped the phone. It clattered onto the asphalt, screen cracking. She stood frozen, her hands shaking so violently she had to grip her own arms to keep them steady. "He found us." The panic was a physical blow. It hit her in the stomach, doubling her over. She had to leave. She had to get Leo. They had to run. Tonight, right now. She stumbled back inside, blindly pushing through the kitchen doors. She needed her purse. She needed to get out. She ran headlong into a wall of solid chest. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, stabilizing her. She looked up, gasping into the furious, concerned face of Luca Marino. "Isla, He looked at her wide, terrified eyes, her pale skin. "What happened? You are shaking." "I have to go," she gasped, struggling against his grip. "Please, let me go. I have to get my son." "Isla, stop!" Luca's voice was commanding, cutting through her hysteria. He did not let go. He maneuvered her backward, pinning her gently against the stainless steel prep table, boxing her in with his body so she could not bolt. "Look at me. Breathe. He found me." The scream tore out of her throat, raw and broken. "He called me. He is coming." The kitchen staff had gone quiet, staring, but Luca waved a hand, dismissing them. Within seconds, the room cleared, leaving them alone in the harsh fluorescent light. "Who found you?" Luca demanded. His voice was low, dangerous. "The man who gave you the bruise." Isla crumpled, her legs gave out, and she would have hit the floor if Luca had not caught her. He effortlessly lifted her onto the edge of the metal table, his hands resting on her waist, keeping her upright. "Brett," she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "My ex, he nearly killed me 3 years ago. He broke my jaw. He broke 3 ribs. He said if I ever tried to leave, he would bury me." Luca went very still. His hands tightened on her waist, not hurting her, but grounding her. "And you ran." "I took Leo and I ran while he was passed out." She wept. "We have been running ever since. But he called. He knows I am here. He said he is close." She looked up at him, grabbing the lapels of his expensive suit, desperate. "I have to leave. I cannot let him touch Leo." "Please, you have to let me go." "I'm not letting you go anywhere," Luca said. Isla flinched, pushing at his chest. "You do not understand. He is violent. He is crazy. He will kill us." "He will not touch you," Luca snarled. The sound was so primal it stopped her tears. "Do you hear me? He will not breathe the same air as you. You cannot stop him," she whispered, defeated. We are nobody. You do not know what he is like." Luca stepped closer, stepping between her knees. He took her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away the tears that streaked her cheeks. "You are right. I do not know what he is like. But he does not know what I am like." He leaned his forehead against hers, forcing her to look into his eyes. They were dark, burning with a terrifying promise. "I swear to you, in my life, in my family's name, you are safe. I will protect you." "I cannot survive it again," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I cannot take any more violence, Luca." "I am broken enough." "I know," he murmured. "I know. That is why you are coming with me." "What?" She pulled back. "You are not going back to that apartment," he stated. "It is not safe. If he has your number, he might have your address. You are coming with me. I have a secure apartment in the city. Guards at the door. 24 hours a day." "No." She shook her head frantically. I cannot bring my son into your world. It is too dangerous." "My world is the only thing dangerous enough to stop him," Luca countered. "Just for a few days, until my men find him and handle it." "Handle it?" She searched his face. "What does that mean?" "It means he goes to jail." Luca lied smoothly. "It means he goes away. Please, Isla, do it for the boy. If you run now, he will just hunt you down again. End it here. Let me help you." Isla looked at him. She saw the strength in his jaw, the fierce protectiveness in his eyes. She was terrified of him, terrified of what he represented. But she was more terrified of the monster she knew. "Okay," she whispered, "just for a few days." The apartment was a fortress in the sky. It was a penthouse overlooking the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the skyline, a glittering expanse of lights that seemed a world away from the grime of the streets below. Isla stood in the center of the living room, holding a sleeping Leo in her arms. Her meager belongings were packed in 2 duffel bags by the door. The space was beautiful, modern and cold. It looked like a magazine spread, not a home. "The guest room is down the hall," Luca said, locking the heavy steel door behind them. He punched a code into a keypad on the wall, engaging the security system. "It has a bed for the boy." Isla nodded stiffly. She carried Leo into the room, tucking him into a bed that was softer than anything he had ever slept on. She sat with him for a long time, listening to his breathing, making sure he was real. When she finally emerged, Luca was in the kitchen. He had discarded his suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his white dress shirt, revealing forearms corded with muscle and ink. He was slicing vegetables. The domesticity of the scene threw her off balance. A mafia boss chopping peppers. "You cook?" she asked, her voice small in the large space. "I eat," he said without looking up. "Therefore, I cook, sit, you need food." Isla sat at the island counter. She watched his hands. They were large, capable hands, hands that she knew had done violent things. Yet, they moved with precision and care as he handled the knife. Over the next 3 days, a strange rhythm developed between them. It was a cage, yes, but it was a gilded one. Isla was wary at first, jumping at every noise, flinching when he moved too fast. But Luca was patient. He gave her space. He never touched her without warning. He spoke in low tones. Passion began to build in the quiet moments. It was not loud or flashy. It was in the way the air seemed to thicken when they were in the same room. One evening, Isla was cooking pasta sauce, stirring the pot on the stove. Luca came in to pour himself a glass of wine. He stood behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his chest, but not touching. "Smells good," he murmured. Isla's hand trembled on the spoon. "It is just a simple recipe. My grandmother's." She turned to reach for the salt and bumped into him. His hands came up to steady her, gripping her hips. The contact was electric. Isla froze, looking up at him. His eyes dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. For a moment, neither of them breathed. His thumbs rubbed slow, distracting circles against the fabric of her jeans. "Isla," he whispered. It sounded like a warning. She stepped back, breathless. The sauce will burn." Luca let her go, but his gaze lingered on her as he walked away. The tension grew tighter with every passing hour. She watched him get ready in the mornings, fixating on the way his fingers moved as he fastened his cufflinks. He watched her play with Leo, a softness in his expression that made her heart ache. Then came the storm. It hit on the 4th night, a summer thunderstorm that shook the building, rattling the massive glass panes. Isla was asleep in the guest room. Leo curled beside her. Crack. The thunder sounded like a gunshot. In her dream, it was a gunshot. Brett was there. He was laughing. He had a gun pointed at Leo. "No!" Isla screamed, bolting upright in bed. She was gasping, sweat drenching her t-shirt. "No, please!" The door burst open. Luca was there instantly. He was shirtless, wearing only gray sweatpants. His chest was broad and scarred, a map of violence etched into his skin, but his face was pure concern. "Isla?" He crossed the room in 2 strides. "He is here," she sobbed, disoriented, still trapped in the nightmare. "He's going to hurt us." "Shh, no, you are safe." Luca sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her into his arms. She did not resist. She collapsed against him, burying her face in the crook of his neck. His skin was hot and solid. He smelled of soap and sleep. "It was just a dream," he murmured, his hand stroking her hair, over and over. "Just the thunder. I have got you. I have got you." Isla clung to him, her fingers digging into his bare shoulders. The terror began to recede, replaced by an overwhelming awareness of him. He was so strong. He felt like a wall between her and the world. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him. The room was dark, lit only by the flashes of lightning outside. Luca looked down at her. His eyes were black pools. His hand moved from her hair to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "You are safe," he whispered again. The air between them crackled, louder than the storm. Isla's gaze dropped to his mouth. She wanted to forget the fear. She wanted to feel something else, something that made her feel alive. She leaned in. Luca met her halfway. The kiss was not rough. It was not the hungry, devouring kiss she might have expected from a man like him. It was deep, slow, and agonizingly tender. His lips moved against hers with a reverence that made her tremble. He tasted wine and darkness. She opened to him, a soft sound escaping her throat. Luca groaned low in his chest, his arm tightening around her waist, pulling her flush against his hard body. His other hand tangled in her hair, tilting her head back to deepen the kiss. For a minute, there was nothing but the storm outside and the heat inside. Isla felt a fire igniting in her belly, a desperate need to be closer, to be possessed, to be claimed by this dangerous man who treated her like glass. She shifted, pressing closer, her hand moving down his chest to rest over his heart. It was beating fast. Luca broke the kiss. He pulled back inches, his forehead resting against hers. His breathing was ragged. "Isla," he rasped. She blinked, dazed, her lips swollen. Reality crashed back in. She was a mother. She was running from an abusive ex. He was a mafia boss. She trembled. "I do not know if I am ready. I do not know how to be with a man who does not want to hurt me," she wanted to say. Luca understood. He did not push. He did not try to persuade her. He kissed her forehead, a chaste, lingering touch that felt more intimate than anything that had happened before. "I will wait," he whispered into her skin. "Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere." He stayed with her until the storm passed, holding her while she fell back into a dreamless sleep, keeping watch over the demons she could not fight alone. When Isla woke the next morning, the bed was empty. The sun was streaming through the curtains, bright and apologetic after the storm. She sat up, touching her lips. The memory of the kiss sent a flush of heat through her body. "Mommy, look!" Leo ran into the room, his eyes wide with wonder. He was holding a large, red toy fire truck. "Leo?" Isla rubbed her eyes. "Where did you get that?" "The man gave it to me. Look, there is more." Isla got out of bed and followed her son into the living room. It was like Christmas. On the coffee table, there were piles of boxes. There were clothes, jeans, t-shirts, a warm winter coat for Leo, soft sweaters and silk blouses for Isla. There were toys, Legos, action figures, art supplies. Luca was standing by the window, drinking coffee. He was dressed in a suit again, his armor back in place. But when he turned to look at them, his expression was open. "I had someone pick up a few things," he said casually. "You left in a hurry. I thought the boy might need something to do." Isla walked over to the pile of clothes. She picked up a small pair of sneakers. They were the exact right size for Leo. He had noticed. He had paid attention to the details she thought were invisible. She looked at Luca. He was watching her, gauging her reaction, perhaps worried he had overstepped. Tears pricked her eyes, but they were not tears of fear this time. "You did this for us?" she asked. "I told you," Luca said, his voice gruff, masking the emotion beneath. "I take care of what is mine." He paused, realizing what he had said. Isla did not correct him. She watched her son zooming the fire truck across the expensive hardwood floor, laughing, a sound she had not heard enough of lately. Someone had cared enough to think of both of them, not just her body, not just her utility, but her son, her heart. She looked back at the mafia boss, and for the first time, the walls around her heart began to crack wide open. Safety, Isla discovered, was not a sudden arrival at a destination. It was a slow thawing, like winter bleeding reluctantly into spring. For the first week in the penthouse, she had walked on the balls of her feet, expecting the floor to drop out from under her. She had startled when the ice maker in the refrigerator cycled on. She had checked the locks on the heavy steel door 3 times before she could close her eyes at night. But by the second week, the ice began to crack. It started with Leo. Children were resilient, their memories short when offered distraction and comfort. Leo loved the penthouse. He loved the floor-to-ceiling windows where he could watch the tiny cars moving like beetles on the streets below. He loved the room full of toys Luca had provided. And because Leo was happy, Isla began to breathe. One Tuesday morning, the sunlight was pouring into the kitchen, turning the marble countertops into gleaming expanses of white gold. Isla was making pancakes. The smell of batter and sizzling butter filled the air, a scent that felt impossibly domestic for a fortress in the sky. Leo was sitting at the island, kicking his legs and recounting a dream he had about a flying dog. Isla laughed, a genuine, bell-like sound that surprised even her. Leaning against the doorframe, Luca Marino watched them. He had a mug of black coffee in his hand, the steam curling around his face. He was dressed for work in a navy suit, but his tie was not yet knotted, hanging loose around his collar. He was not looking at the view outside. He was looking at Isla. He watched the way her hair fell loose from her messy bun. He watched the way her hips swayed slightly as she flipped a pancake. He watched the way the tension that usually held her spine rigid had softened. Isla turned, catching him staring. A blush rose high on her cheeks, but she did not look away. "Do you want one?" she asked, gesturing to the pan with the spatula. "I think I made too many." Luca walked over. Setting his mug down, he moved into her personal space, not crowding her, but close enough that she could smell the sandalwood soap he used. "I have not had pancakes in 20 years, he said. His voice was a low rumble that seemed to vibrate on the floorboards. "Then you are overdue," Isla said, sliding a golden disc onto a plate. She offered it to him. Luca took a bite, watching her eyes the entire time. "Good," he murmured. "Very good." He was not talking about the food. Isla's laugh bubbled up again, softer this time, tinged with a shy awareness. "It is just flour and milk. Luca, it is peace," he corrected gently. "I do not get much of that." For a moment the kitchen felt like the center of the universe. No mafia wars, no abusive exes, just a man and a woman and a little boy with syrup on his chin. 2 hours later, the peace was shattered, though Isla did not know it yet. Luca stood in his private study at the end of the hall, the soundproof door shut tight. Enzo stood on the other side of the desk, his face grim. "Are you sure?" Luca asked. His voice was devoid of the warmth it had held in the kitchen. It was cold, flat, and deadly. 100%, Enzo confirmed. One of our spotters at the bus terminal clocked him, Brett Conley. He got off a Greyhound from Chicago this morning. He looks rough. Boss. Desperate. Luca's hand clenched around his phone. The plastic creaked under the pressure. He was here. The monster was in the city. "Does he know where she is?" Luca asked. "Unclear, but if he is here, he is hunting. A guy like that does not come to the city for sightseeing." Luca looked toward the closed door of the study. Beyond it, down the hall, he could hear the faint sounds of a cartoon playing on the television. Isla felt safe. She had finally started to laugh. If he told her the boogeyman was at the gate, she would shatter. She would pack her bags and run, and out there, in the open, he could not protect her as well as he could here. "Do not tell her," Luca ordered. Enzo frowned. "Luca, she has a right to know. She has a right to live without looking over her shoulder for one more day." Luca snapped. "We found him. We handle him. She never has to know he was even close. Put every available man on the streets. Check the flop houses, the motels, the bars. Find him. Enzo. And when will we find him?" Luca's eyes were dark voids. "Bring him to me." That afternoon, Luca insisted they go out. "Fresh air," he said when Isla looked hesitant. "Leo needs to run around. There is a private park nearby. It is fenced, secure. Nobody gets in without a key." Isla agreed, mostly because Leo was practically vibrating with energy. The park was a manicured square of green nestled between two high-rise luxury buildings. It was quiet, occupied only by a few nannies pushing strollers. It felt secluded, cut off from the chaos of the city. Ela sat on a bench, watching Leo climb a jungle gym. The sun was warm on her face. She closed her eyes, tilting her head back, letting the heat soak into her skin. "You look beautiful when you are not afraid," Luca said. He was sitting next to her, his arm draped along the back of the bench. It was a protective posture, creating a barrier between her and the rest of the world. Isla opened her eyes and looked at him. "I'm starting to forget," she admitted softly, "what it feels like to be afraid all the time. That scares me too. It feels dangerous to relax." "Let me worry for you," Luca said. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His knuckles grazed her cheekbone, a touch so light it was like a phantom. "You just live." Isla smiled, leaning slightly into his hand. Then she saw him, across the street. Beyond the iron fence of the park, a man was standing on the corner. He wore a gray hooded sweatshirt, the hood pulled up. He was looking toward the park. Isla froze. Her blood ran cold, the warmth of the sun vanishing instantly. The height, the build, the way he stood, with his shoulders hunched forward. "Brett," she whispered. Luca followed her gaze instantly. His body went rigid. "Where?" "The man in the gray hoodie. By the traffic light." Luca looked. His eyes narrowed, scanning the figure with predatory focus. He signaled to two men in suits who were standing inconspicuously near the park entrance. They began to move toward the gate. The man in the hoodie turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of pedestrians. "It was him," Isla gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "He found us. He was watching." Luca grabbed her hand, squeezing it tight enough to ground her. "Isla, look at me." She turned to him, her eyes wide and swimming with panic. "We have to go. We have to get Leo." "It might not have been him," Luca said, though he knew the odds. Paranoia or not, the threat was real. "But we are leaving. Now." He stood, shielding her body with his own. He called to Leo, his voice calm but authoritative. Within seconds, he had them ushered into the waiting armored SUV at the curb. As the car pulled away, Isla shook. She wrapped her arms around herself, rocking slightly. The illusion of safety had popped like a soap bubble. Luca pulled her into his side. He did not say empty words. He simply held her, his arm like an iron band, anchoring her to the seat, to him, to the present. Night fell heavy and suffocating over the city. Back in the penthouse, the blinds were drawn. The security system was armed. Leo was asleep in his room, oblivious to the tension that thickened the air like smoke. Isla stood in the center of the living room. She could not stop pacing. The image of the man in the gray hoodie was burned into her retinas. Was it him? Or was she just seeing ghosts? "Isla!" Luca stood in the doorway of his bedroom. He had discarded his jacket and tie. The top buttons of his shirt were undone. He looked tired, the weight of his secrets pressing down on his shoulders. "I cannot sleep," she whispered. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him." "Then do not close your eyes," Luca said. He walked toward her. He stopped a foot away. The air between them crackled, charged with the fear of the day and the undeniable pull that had been building for weeks. "I can protect you from everything out there," Luca said, his voice rough. "But I cannot protect you from your own mind. You have to let me in. Isla?" Isla looked up at him. She saw the raw need in his eyes, not just a need for her body, but a need to be her shield, her sanctuary. She was tired of being afraid. She was tired of being the victim. She wanted to feel something else. She wanted to feel alive. She wanted to feel his. "Make me forget," she whispered. It was a plea. Luca did not hesitate. He stepped forward and framed her face with his hands. "I will." He kissed her. And this time, there was no hesitation. It was a claim. His mouth was hot and demanding, sweeping away the cold dread that had settled in her bones. Isla made a desperate sound in her throat and gripped his shirt, pulling him closer. He lifted her effortlessly, wrapping her legs around his waist, and carried her into the bedroom. The room was dim, lit only by the city glow filtering through the cracks in the curtains. He set her down on the edge of the bed, standing between her knees. The undressing was slow, a reverent unveiling. Luca unbuttoned her blouse one button at a time, his eyes following his fingers. He treated her skin as if it were precious, as if it were something to be worshipped, not conquered. When her shirt fell away, he traced the faint, old scars on her ribs, remnants of a life she was trying to escape. He bent his head and pressed his lips to the white lines, a silent vow of vengeance and protection. Isla trembled, her hands finding the buttons of his shirt, fumbling in her haste. She needed skin against skin. She needed the weight of him to prove that she was still here, that she was real. When they finally lay back against the sheets, stripped of barriers, the world outside ceased to exist. They made love with a desperate, aching slowness. It was not just friction, it was a conversation without words. Luca moved over her and within her, his eyes locked on hers, refusing to let her look away, refusing to let her drift back into fear. "Look at me," he whispered, his voice strained with control. "You are here, with me, Nowhere else. I am here, she gasped, arching into him. Every touch was a promise. His hands memorized the curve of her hip, the arch of her spine. Her hands tangled in his hair, pulling him down until their breaths mingled, hot and fast. When the crest came, it was shattering. Isla cried out, her body bowing like a string pulled tight, and Luca followed her into the dark, groaning her name against her neck as if it were a prayer. Afterward. The silence was heavy, but it was no longer fearful. Isla lay with her head on Luca's chest, listening to the steady, powerful thud of his heart. His arm was draped over her, holding her close. She traced a finger over the tattoo on his pectoral muscle, a black lion. I am scared, she whispered into the darkness. Luca's hand tightened on her shoulder. Of him? Of this, she admitted. I need you this much. If you leave, if something happens to you, I will not just be alone again. I will be destroyed. Luca shifted, turning so he could look at her. He brushed the hair away from her damp forehead. I am not going anywhere, he swore. You are not alone anymore. Isla, I have got you. I have got the boy. We are a family now, whether you are ready to say the word or not. Isla closed her eyes, a single tear slipping out. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. She fell asleep wrapped in his arms, exhausted by the adrenaline and the emotion. But Luca did not sleep. He waited until her breathing evened out into a deep, rhythmic slumber. Then, he carefully untangled himself from her limbs. He rose from the bed, dressing silently in the dark. He walked into the living room and pulled his phone from his discarded jacket pocket. He dialed Enzo. Status, Luca demanded, his voice a whisper that cut like a knife. We lost the guy in the hoodie, Enzo reported, sounding frustrated. But we have a lead on a motel in the meatpacking district. A clerk thinks he saw a guy matching Conley's description checking in under a fake name. Burn it down if you have to, Luca said, staring out at the city lights that looked like cold, indifferent eyes. Find him. Track him. Do not approach him yet. I want to be the one who ends it. Understood, boss. Luca hung up. He stood by the window for a long time, watching the city. He had made a promise to Isla that she was safe. He intended to keep it, even if he had to wash his hands in blood to do it. The next morning, the bubble did not just pop, it exploded. Isla woke up alone in the massive bed, but the smell of coffee told her Luca was nearby. She stretched, her body aching in a way that made her blush. She felt different, stronger. She put on a silk robe Luca had bought her and walked into the living room. Luca was standing by the front door of the penthouse. He was staring at the floor. His back was to her, but the tension in his shoulders was so extreme it radiated across the room. Luca? She called out softly. Is something wrong? Luca turned slowly. His face was a mask of fury so profound it terrified her. In his hand, he held a piece of paper. How? He snarled. He was not speaking to her. He was speaking to the universe, to his guards, to himself. How did he get this close? Isla walked forward, her heart hammering. What is it? Luca tried to hide the paper behind his back, but she reached for it. He let her take it, perhaps realizing there was no point in hiding it anymore. It was a piece of lined notebook paper, cheap and yellowed. It had been folded and slipped under the heavy steel door of the penthouse, past the guards in the lobby, past the cameras in the elevator, past the men stationed in the hall. On it, scrawled in erratic, jagged handwriting, were 6 words. I know where you sleep now. Isla dropped the paper. She backed away, her hands flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. He was here, she whispered. He was right outside the door. While we were sleeping, Luca roared. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. He spun around and drove his fist into the plaster wall next to the door. The impact was sickening. The drywall crunched, dust flying into the air. Enzo! Luca bellowed, his voice shaking the walls. 2 guards burst in from the hallway, guns drawn, looking panicked. He was here! Luca screamed at them, pointing to the paper on the floor. A rat walked right up to my door and left a love note, and you stood there and did nothing. The guards went pale. Boss, He dies tonight, Luca growled. He turned to Isla, his eyes wild. Pack a bag. I am moving you to a safe house in the country. I am going to find him, and I am going to tear him apart piece by piece. Isla looked at the hole in the wall. She looked at Luca's bleeding knuckles. She saw the monster rising in him, the same violence that lived in Brett, just directed at a different target. No, she said. Luca stopped, blinking. What? No, Isla said louder. She walked over to him, ignoring the guards, ignoring the fear clawing at her throat. She took his bleeding hand in hers. You cannot kill him. Isla, look at the note, Luca shouted. He's threatening you. He's threatening the boy. There is no other way. If you kill him... She squeezed his hand, forcing him to look at her. If you kill him, you go to prison, or his friends come after you, or the police come after us, and I will always be afraid. I will always be waiting for the other shoe to drop. I do not care about the police, Luca spat. I do, Isla cried. I care about you. I just found you. Luca, I cannot watch you destroy your life for a piece of trash like Brett Conley. He deserves to die. Yes, she agreed fiercely. He does. But not by your hand. Not like this. She reached up, cupping his face, smearing a small streak of his own blood on his cheek. Let the law handle him, she begged. You have lawyers. You have connections. Set a trap. Get him arrested. Put him away forever where he can rot. But do not become him. Please, for me. Luca stared down at her. His chest was heaving. The rage was a living thing inside him, demanding blood. He wanted to feel Brett's neck snap. He wanted to erase the threat permanently. But he looked into Isla's eyes, eyes that were finally clear of fear, eyes that were pleading for his soul, not just her safety. He closed his eyes and exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. Fine, he growled, the word tasting like ash. We do it your way, but if he slips up, if he steps 1 inch out of line, then you can handle it, Isla finished. But give this a chance. Luca opened his eyes. The fury was still there, simmering, but it was controlled again. Enzo, he barked, not looking away from Isla. Get the lawyer, get the detectives on the payroll. We are setting a trap. The law, Luca Marino discovered, was a blunt instrument when trying to catch a ghost. For 3 days, the city's underbelly had been turned upside down. Corrupt detectives on Luca's payroll had kicked down doors in the meatpacking district. His private lawyers had filed emergency injunctions and protective orders that would flag Brett Conley's name in every system from the DMV to the hospital records. They had tightened the net until it should have been impossible for a cockroach to slip through, let alone a desperate man with a drinking problem. But the net had come up empty. Luca stood in his study, the phone pressed to his ear, his knuckles white as he gripped the mahogany edge of his desk. Say that again, Luca said, his voice dangerously quiet. He's gone. Mr. Marino, the detective said, his voice trembling slightly over the line. We tossed the motel room. He left in a hurry. There were maps, empty bottles, but no trail. He ditched his burner phone. He's off the grid. Luca hung up without a word. He stared out the window at the gray skyline. The legal trap had failed. The civilized way Isla had begged for had only bought the monster time to vanish into the shadows. In the living room, the sound of a zipper tearing through silence cut through Luca's brooding. He walked out to find Isla standing by the sofa. A suitcase was open. She was throwing clothes into it, her movements frantic, jerky, like a bird beating its wings against a cage. Isla, Luca said. She did not look up. He's gone. I heard you on the phone. They cannot find him. We will find him, Luca said, stepping closer. No! She spun around, clutching a pile of Leo's t-shirts against her chest. Her eyes were wild. The calm of the last week shattered completely. He is invisible. Luca, that is what he does. He waits until you stop looking, and then he strikes. I cannot stay here. I am a sitting duck. And where will you go? Luca asked, his voice rising slightly. A motel? A shelter? You think you are safer out there on the street than you are with me? I think everyone near me gets hurt, she cried. He will come for you next. I cannot have that on my conscience. She turned back to the suitcase, her hands shaking so hard she dropped the shirts. Before she could reach for them, Luca was there. He grabbed her arms, spinning her around. He did not hurt her, but he did not let her go. He forced her to stop moving, to stop running. "Look at me," he commanded. Isla looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Please, let me go." "No," Luca said. He brought his hands up to cup her face, his thumbs wiping away the hot tears. "You asked me to try it your way. We did. Now, you have to trust me to handle it, but you do not run. Running is over." "I am scared," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I know," Luca murmured, resting his forehead against hers. "But you are mine now, and nothing takes what is mine." The illusion of safety was a fragile thing, and shattered glass was its only currency. 2 days later, the cabin fever had become unbearable. Isla had begged for a moment of normalcy, just 20 minutes to go to the grocery store. She needed to buy Leo's specific brand of cereal, the one with the cartoon tiger on the box that comforted him. She needed to feel like a mother, not a prisoner, Luca had agreed, but only with a detail of 4 men. 2 inside the store, 2 at the exits. It should have been impregnable. The grocery store was bright, smelling of floor wax and baking bread. It was mundane, safe. Isla walked down the cereal aisle, her heart rate finally slowing as she scanned the colorful boxes. One of Luca's men, a burly guard named Marco, was 10 feet behind her, pretending to look at oatmeal. Isla reached for the box on the top shelf. Her fingers grazed the cardboard. Suddenly, a hand clamped around her upper arm. It was not a gentle touch. It was a vice grip, digging into the soft flesh, bruising deep. Isla gasped, spinning around. Brett was there. He looked like a specter. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red. He had shaved his head, likely to change his appearance, and wore a dirty maintenance uniform that allowed him to blend in with the store staff. He smelled of stale liquor and old sweat. "Did you think you could hide behind a suit?" Brett hissed. His voice was a rusty blade. Isla's throat closed up. The scream died in her chest. She stared at him, paralyzed by the nightmare standing in the cereal aisle. "Brett," she choked out, "you belong to me, so—" He snarled, jerking her closer. "Not him, me. Let go of her," the shout came from down the aisle. Marco was sprinting toward them, his hand reaching into his jacket. Brett saw the guard. He saw the trap closing. He yanked Isla hard, pulling her off balance so she stumbled into the shelving unit. Cans of soup rained down around them with a deafening crash. Isla finally found her voice. She screamed, a high, piercing sound of pure terror that stopped the entire store cold. "Help! Call the police!" A woman at the end of the aisle dropped her basket and fumbled for her phone, shouting into it, "911! We need help!" Brett looked at the guard closing in, then back at Isla. His face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. He released her arm, shoving her violently into the metal shelves. He leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. "Next time," he whispered, "I will not miss." Then he was running. He bolted toward the back of the store, shoving past a terrified stockboy, disappearing through the employee entrance into the loading dock before Marco could reach him. Isla slid down the shelving unit to the linoleum floor, shaking violently, clutching her arm where his fingers had left their mark. Luca did not speak when he saw the surveillance footage. He sat in the security room of the club, watching the screen in silence. He watched the man grab Isla. He watched her stumble. He watched the fear on her face. When the video ended, Luca stood up and walked to the console. He ripped the monitor cables out of the wall and threw the screen across the room. It shattered against the far wall, a shower of sparks and plastic. "I failed," Luca said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. "Boss, he was in a disguise," Enzo said carefully. "Marco was right there. He got away in seconds. Seconds are the difference between life and death." Luca turned, his eyes burning with a cold, blue fire. She was terrified, in a grocery store, under my protection. He adjusted his cuffs, a mechanical motion to contain the violence vibrating under his skin. "Pack everything," Luca ordered. "The penthouse is compromised. If he can get into a store with my men there, He can get anywhere. We are moving to the estate." The estate was a fortress. It was a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by 10-foot stone walls and an iron gate. It was where the Marino family went during wars. The drive was silent. Isla sat in the back of the armored SUV, Leo asleep with his head on her lap. She traced the fresh bruises on her arm, her eyes hollow. When they arrived, the sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the manicured lawns. Armed men with assault rifles walked the perimeter. This was not a home. It was a bunker wrapped in velvet. Luca led her upstairs to the master suite. He did not say a word until the door was closed and locked. "I am sorry," he said. He stood by the fireplace, refusing to look at her. "I promised you safety. I lied." Isla looked at him. She saw the guilt eating him alive. She saw the man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, crumbling because he thought he had failed her. She walked across the room. She did not stop until she was standing right in front of him. "You did not lie," she said softly. "You came for me. I was not there," he said bitterly, "but you are here now." Isla reached out and took his hand. His fingers were cold. She pulled him toward the massive 4-poster bed. "Isla," he warned, trying to pull back. "I am dangerous for you. Look at what my world brought to your doorstep." "No," she said fiercely. "Brett brought this. You are the one standing between him and me." She pulled him down onto the bed. The need in her was sudden and overwhelming. She needed to erase the memory of the grocery store. She needed to replace the bruising grip of her ex with the touch of the man who would burn the world down for her. "Make me feel safe," she whispered, climbing onto his lap. "Please, Luca." The barrier broke. Luca groaned, a sound of surrender, and wrapped his arms around her. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling the scent of her skin, desperate to reassure himself that she was alive, that she was whole. Their reunion was raw. There was no slow seduction this time. It was a collision of fears and needs. Isla pulled at his shirt, popping a button in her haste to feel his skin against hers. Luca's hands were everywhere, gripping her waist, tangling in her hair, holding her hips as if he were afraid she would vanish if he let go. When they moved together, it was fierce. It was the kind of lovemaking that happens on the edge of a cliff. It was gripping sheets and whispered names, bodies pressing together to drive out the cold. "Isla," he gasped, looking down at her, his eyes blown wide and dark. "Do not let me go," she begged, arching into his touch, her fingers digging into his shoulders. "Ever." Luca stopped moving for a second, holding her gaze with an intensity that seared her soul. "Never," he vowed. He kissed her then, hard and possessing, sealing the promise against her mouth. He loved her with a desperation that terrified him, moving with a rhythm that spoke of ownership and absolute protection. When the end came, they clung to each other, breathing the same air, two broken pieces fused together by the heat of the moment. The morning light that filtered through the heavy curtains was gray and unforgiving. Isla woke to the sound of Luca checking a handgun. He was sitting in the armchair by the window, fully dressed in a black tactical suit that she had never seen him wear. It made him look like a soldier. He was sliding a magazine into a sleek black pistol with a metallic click. Isla sat up, pulling the sheet around her. The peace of the night before evaporated. "What are you doing?" she asked. Luca looked up. His face was grim. "I have to tell you something. Something I should have told you days ago." Isla went still. "What?" "Brett," Luca said, standing up and holstering the weapon. "He's not just an abusive ex-husband. Isla, my men dug deeper before he met you, before he spiraled. He worked as a low-level enforcer for the Moretti family in Chicago." Isla blinked. "The Mafia? A rival syndicate?" Luca corrected. "He stole from them before he ran. There is a bounty on his head, $50,000. That is why he is so desperate. He does not just want you back to control you. He thinks if he gets you, he can leverage my protection to pay off his debt. Or worse, sell you out to them." Isla felt the blood drain from her face. "Oh my God, he's a dead man walking," Luca said. "But a dead man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous thing on earth. So what do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. We just hide here forever?" "No," Luca said. He walked over to the bed and sat down, taking her hand. "We end it. Today." "How?" "I am the bait," Luca said simply. Isla squeezed his hand, her nails digging in. "What does that mean?" "I'm going to leak information that I am leaving the city for a meeting. I'm going to take a car, unguarded, to the old shipping yards. We will make sure Brett hears about it. He hates me almost as much as he wants you. He blames me for taking you. If he thinks I am alone, if he thinks he can kill me and get to you, he will come out." "No," Isla said immediately. "No, Luca, it is a trap. He will kill you." "He will try," Luca corrected, "but he will fail. The shipping yard is my territory. I will have men in the shadows, but I have to be the one in the open. I have to be the target." "You cannot go alone," she begged, tears filling her eyes again. "Please, send someone else. Send Enzo." "It has to be me," Luca said firmly. "He knows my face. He knows my car. If he smells a trap, he runs again. And we are back to looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives. Do you want that?" "I want you alive," she whispered. "I will be alive," he promised. He leaned forward and kissed her deeply. "This ends now, Ela. Tonight. You sleep without fear." He stood up and walked to the door. "Luca," she called out. He stopped, hand on the doorknob. "Come back to me," she said. He nodded once, his expression unreadable, and walked out. Downstairs, the mansion was a hive of activity. Men were loading weapons into SUVs. Enzo was barking orders into a radio. Luca walked into his private office and closed the door. He needed 1 minute. He sat at the heavy oak desk and pulled out a piece of thick, cream-colored stationery. He took a fountain pen from the holder. His hand hovered over the paper. He had written death warrants, business contracts, and treaties with rival families. He had never written a goodbye. He thought of Ila's face when she laughed. He thought of the way Leo looked at him, like he was a hero instead of a criminal. He thought of the way Isla had held him last night, as if he were her anchor. If this went wrong, and things always had a chance of going wrong, he needed her to know. He needed her to know that she had not just been a charity case. She had been the only thing that had made him feel human in 20 years. He began to write. "Isla, if you are reading this, it means I broke my promise. It means I did not come back. Do not mourn me. I have lived a life of violence, and I always knew it would end in violence. But these last few weeks with you have been the only peace I have ever known. The deed to this house is in your name. The accounts are set up for the boy's education. You will never have to worry about money again. Enzo will protect you. Trust him. You saved me. Ela, you woke me up. Do not let the world turn you cold. Keep your heart soft. It is your greatest strength. I loved you. From the moment you spilled that drink, I loved you." Luca folded the letter. His hands were steady. He placed it in an envelope and sealed it with wax. On the front, he wrote only one name, Isla. He placed the letter in the center of the desk, where it would be found if he did not return to claim it. Then he stood up, checked his weapon one last time, and walked out to face the monster. The shipping yard was a graveyard of industry, a rusted labyrinth of corrugated steel containers stacked like the forgotten bones of giants. The air smelled of salt, diesel, and decay. It was the perfect place for a ghost to die. Luca Marino leaned against the hood of his black sedan, the engine block still radiating heat against his back. He was alone. To any observer, he looked like a man waiting for a business deal, checking his watch, exposed under the solitary halogen floodlight that buzzed angrily overhead. But Luca was not exposed. He was the lure, in the shadows of the stacked containers. 50 yards out, Enzo and 3 of his best marksmen were statues, their breathing shallow, their eyes trained on the perimeter. They had orders. "Do not engage unless I give the signal. I want him close." A gravel crunch echoed through the silence. Luca did not flinch. He slowly lit a cigarette, the flare of the lighter illuminating the sharp angles of his face. He took a drag and exhaled a plume of gray smoke. "You look comfortable for a man who is about to bleed out." Brett Conley stepped into the ring of light. He looked feral. His eyes were wild, darting around the yard, but they kept snapping back to Luca with a hatred that bordered on madness. In his right hand, a snub-nosed revolver trembled. "You are late, Brett," Luca said, his voice bored. "I hate waiting." "Shut up," Brett screamed, the sound tearing through the night. "You think you are better than me? You think because you have money and suits, you can take what is mine?" "Isla is not a thing," Luca said calmly, flicking ash onto the pavement. "You cannot own a person." "She was mine first." Brett stepped closer, the gun waving erratically. "She was happy with me until she got ideas, until she thought she was too good for her life, and then you stole her. You stole my family. You broke her jaw," Luca said. The boredom vanished from his voice, replaced by a glacier-cold rage. "You terrorized a child. You are not a father. You are a disease. And you are the cure?" Brett let out a jagged laugh. "You are a criminal. Marino. Just like me. The only difference is, I am going to walk out of here, and you are going to be meat on the pavement." Brett raised the gun, aiming for Luca's chest. Luca moved. He did not run away. He lunged forward, in the split second before Brett's finger tightened on the trigger. Luca kicked the bumper of the car, throwing himself sideways. Bang! The shot went wide, sparking off the asphalt. Before Brett could fire again, Luca was on him. He tackled the other man, driving his shoulder into Brett's midsection. The air left Brett's lungs in a wet gasp, and they hit the ground hard. The gun skittered away into the darkness. "Now," Luca growled. "It is just us." Brett scrambled back. Reaching into his boot, steel flashed. A knife! He slashed out wildly. Luca threw his arm up to block, and the blade bit deep into his forearm. Pain, white-hot and sharp, seared through him, but Luca did not stop. He grabbed Brett's wrist, twisting it with bone-breaking force. Brett howled, dropping the knife. Luca drove a fist into Brett's face. It was a brutal, sickening sound. Blood sprayed across Luca's white shirt. "That was for the bruise on her thigh," Luca snarled, hitting him again. Brett tried to fight back, clawing at Luca's eyes, kicking, spitting, but he was a brawler fighting a soldier. Luca absorbed the blows, his focus narrowing to a single point of violence. He pinned Brett to the gravel, his knees on the man's biceps. He wrapped his hands around Brett's throat. "And this," Luca whispered, tightening his grip, "is for making her afraid to sleep." Brett's face turned purple. His eyes bulged, pleading, terrified. Life began to flicker out of him. Luca felt the pulse fluttering under his thumbs. It would be so easy. One squeeze, one snap. The monster would be gone. The threat would be extinguished if you kill him. "I will always be afraid." Isla's voice rang in his head, clearer than the ringing in his ears. "Let the law handle him. Do not become him." Luca froze. He looked down at the pathetic, broken man beneath him. If he killed him now, he proved Brett right. He proved he was just another violent animal. With a roar of frustration, Luca released his grip. He sat back, breathing heavily, blood dripping from his arm onto the gravel. "You are not worth my soul," Luca spat. He whistled sharp and loud from the shadows. Footsteps pounded. Not his men, but detectives. The headlights of 2 unmarked police cars flared to life from behind the container stacks, blinding them. "Police! Down on the ground!" The trap had worked. They had been recording everything, the attempted murder, the confession of ownership, the weapon. 2 detectives hauled a gasping, coughing Brett to his feet. He looked at Luca, his eyes wide with shock. He had expected death. He had not expected mercy. "You will regret this," Brett screamed, spit flying from his bloody mouth as they handcuffed him. "I will come back, you hear me? I will come back." Luca stood up. He pressed a handkerchief to his bleeding arm, watching impassively. "You will rot in a cage, Brett," Luca said, his voice cutting through the sirens. "That is justice." As the cruiser doors slammed shut, caging the nightmare, Luca finally let his shoulders drop. He looked at the blood soaking his sleeve. It hurt, but it felt like a clean pain. The drive back to the estate felt like it took a lifetime. Isla had paced a hole in the Persian rug of the foyer. Every time the grandfather clock chimed, she flinched. It had been 3 hours, 3 hours of silence. 3 hours of wondering if she was a widow before she had ever been a wife. Leo was asleep upstairs, guarded by a nanny. The house was silent, a tomb waiting for news. Then, headlights swept across the front windows. Isla froze. She stared at the heavy oak door, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The lock turned. The handle is depressed. The door swung open. Luca stood there. He looked like a ruin. His jacket was gone. His white shirt was torn and stained with red, too much red. His face was bruised, a cut bleeding sluggishly over his eye. He was leaning heavily against the doorframe, as if staying upright required every ounce of his will. "Luca," Isla breathed. She did not scream. She did not recoil from the blood. She ran. She crossed the foyer in seconds, crashing into him. He caught her with his good arm, groaning slightly at the impact, but he buried his face in her hair instantly. "I have got you," he rasped. "I am here." They sank to the floor. His legs gave out, or maybe hers did. It did not matter. They collapsed onto the marble tiles in a tangle of limbs and relief. Isla was crying, hysterical, happy sobs that shook her whole body. Her hands were everywhere, touching his face, his shoulders, his chest, checking for bullet holes, checking for life. "You are bleeding," she wept, pressing her hands to his shirt as if she could hold the blood inside him. "Oh God, you are bleeding." "It is nothing," Luca whispered, kissing the tears from her cheeks, smearing a little of his own blood on her skin. "He is gone. Isla, he's in custody. It is over. You came back," she choked out, pulling his face down to hers. "You promised and you came back." "I told you," he murmured against her mouth. "Nothing takes what is mine." She kissed him then. It tasted of copper and salt and exhaustion. She kissed the cut over his eye. She kissed the bruise on his jaw. She kissed him as if she could breathe her own life into him and heal him from the inside out. Later. The silence in the master bedroom was thick and velvet soft. Isla had cleaned his wounds. The cut on his arm was deep and had required butterflies and bandages, but it would heal. The bruises would fade. They lay in the center of the massive bed, the duvet pulled up to their waists. The lights were off, save for the glow of the fireplace. The frantic energy of the reunion had ebbed, leaving behind something slower, deeper, and infinitely more intimate. Luca lay on his back, his bandaged arm resting on his stomach. Isla lay on her side, her head on his shoulder, her hand resting over his heart. She needed to feel it beating. Thump, 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 thump. A rhythm of survival. She traced the line of an old scar on his chest with her fingertip. "I thought I lost you," she whispered into the darkness. "You cannot lose me," Luca replied, his voice rough with sleep and emotion. "I am tethered to you." He turned his head to look at her. The firelight caught the gold in her eyes. "Did you kill him?" she asked quietly. "No." Isla let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "I wanted to," Luca admitted. "I had him by the throat. I wanted to snap him like a twig, but I heard your voice. I did not want to bring that darkness home to you." Isla shifted, climbing half on top of him, careful of his injuries. She looked down at him, her hair creating a curtain around them. "You are a good man." "Luca Marino," she whispered. "I am a dangerous man," he corrected. "You are the man who saved us." She lowered her mouth to his. The kiss was slow, aching with gratitude. It was not about lust. It was about communion. His hand came up to cup the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair, holding her there. They moved against each other with a gentleness that belied the violence of the night. Every touch was a reassurance. "I am here. You are safe. We are alive." When he entered her, it was slow and deep, a grounding connection that anchored them both to the earth. Isla sighed his name against his throat, tears slipping from the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer, overwhelming weight of being loved this much. They lay together for a long time afterward, listening to the crackle of the fire, limbs tangled, unwilling to separate even by an inch. An hour later, Luca sat up. "What is it?" Isla murmured sleepily, reaching for him. "One thing left to do." He stood up, wrapping a robe around his battered frame. He walked to the desk in the corner of the room. In the center of the polished wood sat a cream-colored envelope. The wax seal was unbroken. Isla. Isla sat up in bed, watching him. "What is that?" Luca picked up the letter. He weighed it in his hand. It contained his goodbye. It contained the confession of a man who thought he was walking to his execution. It was a testament to fear, and tonight, fear had no place in this house. "Insurance," Luca said. That expired. He walked to the fireplace. He held the envelope over the flames. The paper caught. The fire curled the edges, turning the cream to black ash. The wax seal melted, dripping like red tears into the hearth. Luca watched it burn until it was nothing but dust. He did not need to say goodbye. He was not going anywhere. He turned back to the bed. Isla was watching him, her eyes soft and knowing. She lifted the duvet. An invitation. Luca climbed back beside her. He pulled her against him, his back against the headboard, her back against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, locking her in tight. Isla curled her fingers over his forearm, resting her head back against his shoulder. The house was quiet. The guards outside were vigilant. The monster was in a cage. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered into the silence. Luca pressed a kiss to the top of her head. He closed his eyes, finally letting the soldier rest. "Good," he said, his voice deep and final, "because this is forever now." Justice did not come with the bang of a gavel, but with the scratching of a pen in a quiet, sterile room. In the weeks following the showdown at the shipping yard, the city seemed to exhale. The storm that had hovered over Isla Romano's life for 3 years had finally broken, leaving behind a sky that was terrifyingly clear. Isla did not have to stand in a crowded courtroom and point a shaking finger at the man who had tormented her. Luca's lawyers, a phalanx of sharks in Italian suits, arranged for a private deposition. She sat in a room with a video camera, her hands clasped on the table, and told her story. She spoke of the broken bones, the threats, the night she ran with Leo in her arms. She spoke not as a victim, but as a witness to a crime that was finally ending. Brett Conley was denied bail. The bounty on his head from the Chicago syndicate meant he was placed in protective custody, isolated in a concrete box 23 hours a day. But it was not just Isla's testimony that buried him. Once the news broke that the ghost of Chicago was behind bars, the phone lines at the district attorney's office began to ring. Other women from his past, women he had used and discarded, women who had been too afraid to speak until they saw that a single mother had stood up and won. They came forward, a chorus of survivors adding their weight to the cage door. Brett took a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He would spend the rest of his natural life in a maximum security facility, staring at a gray wall. Forgotten by the world he had tried to terrorize. When the news came, Isla was in the garden of Luca's estate. She put down the phone, looked at the high stone walls that protected her, and felt a phantom weight lift off her shoulders. It was physical, visceral. The tension that had held her spine rigid for years dissolved. She was free. Freedom, however, brought new challenges. Isla was no longer just a waitress running from a ghost. She was the woman who had brought the Marino family boss to his knees, not with a weapon, but with a look. 2 months after the arrest, Luca told her it was time. Time for what? She asked, adjusting the collar of his shirt as they stood in the foyer. To meet the family, Luca said. The real family. It was a Sunday dinner. In the Mafia world, Sunday dinner was more than a meal. It was a summit. The capos, the lieutenants, the men who ran the docks and the unions. They would all be there. Isla wore a dress Luca had bought for her. It was midnight blue, modest but fitted, made of silk that whispered against her skin. She wore no jewelry except for a simple diamond pendant, a gift from him. When she walked into the private dining room of the city's most exclusive Italian restaurant, the conversation stopped. 20 men stopped eating. 20 pairs of hard, calculating eyes turned to the door. These were men who smelled fear. These were men who respected only strength. They looked at Isla, the waitress, the single mother, the outsider. Isla felt the old urge to shrink, to hide, to apologize for taking up space. But then she felt a warm, heavy hand on the small of her back. Luca stepped up beside her. He did not look at his men. He looked at her. "Gentlemen," Luca said, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. "This is Isla, and this is her son, Leo." Leo, dressed in a miniature suit that matched Luca's, waved shyly. "Isla is with me," Luca continued. The silence in the room grew heavy. "She is under my protection. She's under my roof. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. Anyone who questions her place at this table questions my leadership." He paused, his dark eyes scanning the room, challenging anyone to speak. "Are we clear?" "Crystal, boss," Enzo said from the end of the table, raising his wine glass. "Welcome to the family, Ela." One by one, the other men raised their glasses. The tension broke. The murmurs of "welcome" and "nice to meet you" rippled through the room. Isla looked up at Luca. He wasn't looking for their approval. He was demanding their respect, and he was giving her his power, wrapping it around her like a cloak. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back, grounding her. She sat down at the right hand of the devil, and for the first time, she felt like a queen. The integration of their lives was not just about the criminal underworld. It was about the quiet moments in between. Leo was flourishing. The estate, once a cold fortress, was now littered with toy trucks, coloring books, and the sound of cartoons on Saturday mornings. One rainy afternoon, Luca was in his study, reviewing ledgers. The door creaked open. He looked up to see Leo standing there, holding a red plastic dinosaur. The boy was 6 years old now, missing a front tooth, and looking at Luca with an intensity that rivaled a federal agent. "Hey, kid," Luca said, closing the ledger. "What is up?" Leo walked into the room and climbed onto the oversized leather chair opposite the desk. He spun the dinosaur in his hands. "My friend at school asked me something today," Leo said. "Oh yeah?" Luca leaned back, amused. "What did he ask?" "He asked who the big guy in the black car who picks me up is." Luca stiffened slightly. He had always been careful to keep the business away from the boy, but Leo was observant. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him you are Luca," Leo said. "That is right. But then he asked if you are my dad." The room went very still. The rain tapped against the window pane, a steady, rhythmic drumming. Luca looked at the boy. He thought of his own father, a hard, brutal man who had taught him that love was a weakness and violence was a currency. He thought of the life he had chosen, the blood on his hands, the sins that stained his soul. What did you say?" Luca asked, his voice raspy. Leo shrugged. "I said I did not know. Are you?" Luca stood up. He walked around the desk and knelt in front of the chair, bringing himself to eye level with the child. "I am not your biological father, Leo," Luca said gently. "You know that." "I know," Leo said matter-of-factly. "But my real dad was mean. Mom said he went away to a timeout forever. You are not mean. You buy me Lego. You make Mom laugh. You scare the bad monsters away." Leo looked at him with pure, unadulterated hope. "So," the boy whispered, "are you like a dad now?" Luca felt a crack in the armor he had worn for 20 years. A hot, stinging sensation pricked behind his eyes. He swallowed past the lump in his throat. He had faced gunmen, rivals, and judges without blinking. But this terrified him. He reached out and placed his large hand on Leo's small knee. "Only if you want me to be," Luca whispered. Leo smiled, a gap-toothed, brilliant smile. "Okay, then you are." He hopped off the chair. "Can we go play Mario Kart now?" Luca let out a shaky laugh, wiping a tear from his cheek before the boy could see it. Yeah, kid. Let's go play Mario Kart." 3 months later, the estate was transformed. It was Isla's birthday. In the past, her birthdays had been days of mourning, reminders of another year lost to fear, another year of survival. Tonight, it was a celebration. The garden was strung with thousands of fairy lights, turning the manicured lawns into a galaxy of soft, glowing stars. A string quartet played in the gazebo. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne. It was a small gathering, just the inner circle. Enzo, a few of the wives, and the staff who had become like family. Isla stepped out onto the terrace. She was wearing white, not a wedding dress, but something close. It was a flowing chiffon gown that moved like water around her legs. Her hair was loose, cascading down her back in dark waves. She looked radiant. She looked whole. Luca stood at the bottom of the stairs, holding 2 glasses of champagne. When he saw her, he stopped. He simply stared. The woman who had flinched at the sound of a dropped glass was gone. In her place was a woman who walked with her head high, who smiled with her eyes, who owned the space she occupied. She descended the stairs and took the glass from his hand. "You are staring," she teased. "I am admiring," he corrected. "You look happy." "I am," she admitted, looking out at the party, at Leo chasing a dog across the lawn, at Enzo laughing with a drink in his hand. "I never thought I would have this. I thought my life was over a long time ago." "Your life is just starting," Luca said. He took her hand. "Come with me." He led her away from the party, through the garden, and up the private staircase to the rooftop terrace of the mansion. The city was spread out before them, a grid of gold and amber light stretching to the horizon. The wind was cool up here, carrying the scent of the ocean and the city streets. Luca walked to the edge of the railing and looked out at his kingdom. Then he turned to look at his queen. He reached into his pocket. Isla's breath hitched. She expected a ring. She expected the traditional gesture, but Luca did not pull out a velvet box. He pulled out a key. It was an old, heavy iron key. "This," Luca said, holding it up, "is the key to a safe deposit box in Switzerland. It contains enough money to vanish, to go anywhere in the world and live like royalty. I set it up 10 years ago as my escape plan. In case life got too hot, in case I needed to run." He took her hand and placed the key in her palm. He curled her fingers over it. "I do not need an escape plan anymore," he said softly, "because I am not running. I am building." He slowly lowered himself onto one knee. Isla gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "I do not have a ring yet," Luca said, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that burned. "Because a ring is just jewelry, and what I am asking for is bigger than that. Luca," she whispered, "I want to build a life with you." "Ila," he said, "not just protect you, not just keep you safe. I want to wake up next to you every day. I want to teach the boy how to be a man who respects women. I want to argue about what color to paint the walls. I want the years, all of them." He paused, his voice rough with emotion. "Will you let me? Will you stay?" Isla looked down at the man who had saved her life, the man who had walked into hell to bring her back. She looked at the key in her hand, his freedom, which he was surrendering to her. She dropped the key. It clattered to the stone floor, ignored. She fell to her knees in front of him, ignoring the expensive dress, ignoring the dirt. She wrapped her arms around his neck. "Yes," she whispered against his ear. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He pulled her back, his hands framing her face. They kissed under the city lights, deep and slow. It was not the desperate kiss of the grocery store or the fearful kiss of the penthouse. It was a seal. It was a promise written in breath and skin. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I love you," she answered. "My monster, my savior." That night, the bedroom door was locked, shutting out the world. The intimacy was different. It was a slow, aching worship. There was no rush. There was no need to prove anything. They moved together with the familiarity of 2 souls who had finally found their matching half. Luca undressed her as if he were unwrapping a holy relic. He kissed the faint, faded yellow mark on her thigh where the bruise used to be. He kissed the scar on her knee. He kissed the pulse beating at her throat. "You are so beautiful," he whispered, his voice ragged. Isla pulled him down. She traced the scars on his back, the bullet wound on his shoulder, the knife cut on his arm. They were a map of his violence, but under her hands, they became a map of his sacrifice. They moved together in the dark, fingers linked, eyes never breaking contact. It was a silent vow, repeated with every touch, every breath, every beat of their hearts. "I am yours. You are mine. We are safe." When the end came, It was a quiet, shuddering release that left them clinging to each other, breathless and stripped bare, not just of clothes, but of defenses. Isla fell asleep with her head on his chest, his arm heavy and protective over her waist, the steady rhythm of his heart lulling her into the first truly peaceful sleep of her life. The next morning, the sun was blinding. Isla stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bathroom. She was wearing one of Luca's white dress shirts, the fabric swallowing her small frame. She looked at her reflection. For years, when she looked in a mirror, she saw a victim. She saw a woman who was broken, hunted, and weak. She saw the bruises, even when they weren't there. Today, she looked. The circles under her eyes were gone. Her skin was flushed. Her eyes were bright, clear, and steady. She stood straighter. She did not see a broken woman. She saw a survivor. She saw a mother. She saw a partner. She saw someone who was loved. Luca appeared in the reflection behind her. He was shirtless, his hair messy from sleep. He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. He looked at her reflection, too. He looked at her with a sense of awe that had not faded in 3 months. "What do you see?" he asked softly. Isla smiled. "I see me. Finally." She turned in his arms to face him. She ran her hands up his bare chest, resting them on his shoulders. "You saved me, Luca," she said. "You gave me my life back." Luca shook his head. His expression was serious, his eyes dark and tender. "No, Isla," he admitted, his voice thick. "You saved me, too. Before you, I was just a suit with a gun. I was a ghost haunting my own life. You gave me a reason to be more than what I was. You gave me a home." He kissed her forehead. "A benediction." "Get dressed," he said softly. "Leo is waiting. We've promised him pancakes." An hour later, they walked out the front door of the mansion. The morning air was crisp. The city hummed in the distance, a beast that had once threatened to swallow them whole, but now seemed to purr in submission. Leo ran ahead, chasing a butterfly, his laughter ringing out like a bell. Luca and Isla walked behind him. They did not hurry. Luca reached out. Isla took his hand, their fingers interlaced naturally, fitting together as if they had been carved from the same stone. They walked down the driveway, past the guards who nodded in respect, past the gates that stood open to the world. They were a family. A mafia boss who had learned to love, a single mother who had learned to trust, a boy who had found a father. The darkness was still there, out in the world. Shadows would always exist. But as they walked forward into the sunlight, hand in hand, Isla knew one thing for certain. They would never have to face the dark alone again. Love, strength, and family now guided their future, and that was the most dangerous, beautiful thing of all. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Isla and Luca, from the fear of the velvet room to the freedom of the rooftop. It has been an honor to write this mafia romance for you. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this tale of protection, passion, and redemption, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Share your thoughts in English in the comments below. Did you like the ending? What kind of story should I write next? I read every single comment. Until next time, stay safe and keep believing in love.